Hello everybody, it's James Diboe, back on Discovering Season 2, and we've got a special guest in the building today, DJ Too Kind. How you doing?
I'm good, man. Thanks for having me, Will.
Good to hear you anyway, and you're a former artist, rap artist, and also you're a DJ. You're involved in many things, and we're going to go into your timeline also. So, okay. How you doing today anyway?
Yeah,
you
I'm
okay?
good. I'm good. I'm glad you introduced me as a former artist. There's probably a few people that are watching thinking, what? Too Kind artist? So
there's a history there, though.
We can clear that up in the show.
Yeah.
Definitely, yeah. But yeah, I'm good. I'm good, and just nice to be here. And the studio's looking good, so yeah, all good.
So we're going back now to hip-hop. First of all, we're going to start off with your influences. Mm-hmm. I'm assuming that's how you got into hip-hop, of course, just like ourselves and that.
Yeah.
So who were the names, who were the kind of artists that influenced you? Are we going back to the 80s? And
yeah, I mean, earliest hip-hop influences, I was lucky that my older brother was into buying records and big into his music. So my earliest influences from a hip-hop perspective comes from very early Run DMC, wow. Houdini was a big influence on me as a young kid. Obviously Grandmaster Flash, Grandmaster Melly Mel. But then it wasn't until around 86, 87, I can remember this like it was yesterday. I was in the living room in the house, in my mum's house, obviously. I must have been 14, 15 at the time, and I was just flicking through the radio, and I don't know what radio station it was, but I heard KRS-One's The Bridge Is Over.
Oh, so, classic.
Up until then, I'd been influenced solely by my brother's music.
Yeah.
But that was the first time where I heard something and I was like, I did something that he'd never played that like just hit me straight away, and I was like, okay, this is me. This is what I like.
This when he buried MC Shan, isn't it?
Oh, absolutely. Like nearly the whole Juice Crew got buried. Yeah. But I mean, I got love for the Juice Crew as well. But yeah. But then, so that's when I really found my own type of, what I felt like was my own type of hip hop. And then from then, come across a good friend of mine, Big Dave, aka Mensa, and he put me onto artists like De La Soul for the first time and Tough Crew for the first time. He even introduced me to the likes of NWA and stuff for the first time, in around 88, 89. And then, so that was my sort of love of hip-hop, started really a lot since then, and just grew and grew and grew.
Did you ever listen to the battles where Kool G Rap and Big Daddy Kane, when they were going back and forth raw?
You know what? Obviously, Big Daddy Kane. Yeah, I didn't mention Kane. For me, I mean, Ain't No Half Stepping for me is still one of the greatest hip hop records of all time.
Yeah,
the flow on that and the whole use of the sample and the way he just flows and the cadence, everything about that. But yeah, and obviously there was that thing with Kool G Rap and Kool G Rap again. I mean, there's so many legends from that era.
Too many.
I mentioned the Juice Crew before, so you got Bismarcky.
They were in the Juice Crew as well.
Shan, you got so many. So
Craig G,
of course.
Yeah.
So that was all a sort of period where I really started to find hip hop for myself, and then it just grew my interest and my love for it, and then I got really into buying records and getting into buying vinyl, and it just grew on from them really.
So okay then, so we've seen a couple of your influences, and a lot of them influences, even though I'm from a 90s era, the Nas's, Tupac's, Biggie's, Mobb Deep's, Wu-Tang, which I forgot to mention last time, one of the best groups ever out, as I've said. But going back though, like I say, I had to do my research going back to the 80s, and I started getting into the 80s because I felt like you've got to know the roots of everything.
Yeah.
So when it came to you starting to write bars and freestyle or whatever you was doing, how did it begin? Did you begin as a soloist or the group? Or
well, funny enough, what happened is that me and Mensa, we used to go to a community centre called the Charles Button Centre on Parliament Street, and upstairs, and that was run by Sugar Dean. Bernie was there as well. Bernie Wenton, and upstairs they had a room with a drum kit in it. And Mensa is a great drummer as well as being a great producer. But before he got into producing hip hop, as I say, he was a great drummer. So what we used to do, Mensa would hit the drums, I'd grab the mic, and we just basically cover songs. So we'd cover De La Soul songs or Tough Crew songs or whatever we knew. And we just kept on doing that for weeks and weeks and weeks. Then one time I went home got one of the records that I'd bought by Main Source. I remember the song. It was called "Watch Roger Do His Thing" by the Main Source. Flipped the instrumental. And I wrote this track about, because at the time in the 90s, carjacking was a major problem, especially in Liverpool 8, but all over the UK in certain areas. But in Liverpool 8, car robbing was a bad thing. So I done this song about, what can happen if you rob cars, basically. So I came back to the Charles Wilton Centre. I was like, let's use the studio upstairs. I've done this rap. So Mentor was like, really? So we went there, done the rap. And Mentor was like, I'm going to go home and do one too. And then that's how the first in command thing started with me and Mentor. So we become first in command. I was MC Toukind. He was Abyss. He was an MC, but also an incredible producer. So, and that was our format then going forward. What we would do, we'd take records that we'd bought, because we were both huge fans of buying vinyl, hip-hop vinyl in particular. So we'd buy a record, and the record would have an instrumental on it, take it home, we'd work out a theme ourselves, and then we'd go and write over whatever record that we want. We'd say, okay, the theme is, let's say the theme is, people who are under the thumb by the girlfriend. We had a song called Under Manners.
Okay.
So then we'd say it's about this tempo. So we'd go away, write our bars, then we'd come together. Mentor would make the beat. And that was our format. And then that led to creating the album that we did in the early 90s, if that makes sense. And the album was called Pest Control. And that was the first Liverpool hip-hop full-length album.
What year, sorry, was that?
We made the album. The album was completed by 1995 fully.
Oh,
but we made it between 94 and 95. Unfortunately, at the time, it never actually came out. A few politics and whatnot. But then, luckily, about 7 years ago, it was picked up by a record label who actually released it on vinyl.
Okay, so what before it came out? That's going back 95, and it only came out 7 years ago. Yeah. So was people around the area that all listened to it? Did you put people? Because when you're saying 7 years ago, it only came out.
What happened is that the idea behind the album was that we were going to make an album entirely and then try and shop it to a record company, as a finished product. But not knowing the industry, the industry didn't want that. I mean, right now in 2021, that is a great idea. Industries are crying out for that because it's already made and packaged and they can just put it out and distribute it.
Okay.
Well, back then, what record labels wanted to do was really get you in their studio, work with their people, make the art, make the music, and then charge you for doing that, and that comes out to your end. Yeah. So we were a bit ahead of our time when it comes to that kind of idea. So because it was an already completed album, it never got picked up. It never got signed. Although it was a great album, and I'm not just saying that. Yeah. You know what I mean? Yeah. But, and then, life gets in the way. You have kids. So as a hip-hop group, but then, as I say, 7 years ago, it was just by chance past our demo. Well, the album was passed to a record label by our good friend Paddy from No Faking. And Bob from the record label, he used to be called Chubby Grooves. He loved it. He said, I want to release this on vinyl, as it should have been nearly 15 years ago.
What? And
the album came out, and then 3 years after that, it came out on CD as an official release. So we finally got it out.
Good.
And it, when I said it was a good album, that's what I mean. All these years later, people still invested money to put that out on vinyl, on CD, and the nice little bonus of that is that they sold out of the vinyl. That's a sellout. You have to go back onto like Discogs or stuff like that to buy it.
So when it came to the DJing now, is this coming after 95 or?
Yeah. I mean,
did you switch from MCing to DJing, was it?
Yeah.
Okay.
So what happened, as I mentioned, I'd always bought vinyl. But even though most of the vinyl I would buy was hip-hop vinyl, I always loved, because of the influence from our kid, I'd always loved like soul and R&B. So it wouldn't be unusual. So say we're talking around 93, a lot of my friends might go to town or go to Manchester or go to wherever and buy just £50 worth of hip-hop or £100 worth of hip-hop. For me, it wouldn't be unusual for me to come back with a Main Source record, a Janet Jackson record, and a Shabba Ranks record. That was just me. That was my musical taste. So after we sort of stopped MCing, the transition into be a DJ wasn't too unusual or difficult for me because I already had that kind of spread when it came to tastes.
Yeah.
So if I'm taking a bunch of vinyl to a club, and there's the club's 75% ladies, I've got those records I can flip for the girls.
Okay, yeah.
Or I can drop a little bit of bashment, or I can drop a little bit of soul, or I can flip it with the hip hop, Naughty by Nature, whatever, for the hip hop heads.
Oh yeah, Naughty by Nature.
So,
classics.
Do you know what I mean? So, I mean, it's funny because I seen a video that popped up from an event in the park years ago, and we're all there DJing, and we're playing like Black Sheep, Flavor of the Month, like to the crowd, like it was, you know what I mean? Like, don't get me wrong, it's a, you know, it's one of my all-time favorites. But to think that back then we were playing that to a wider crowd, whereas now it seemed almost as like a specialized independent hip hop record now.
Who would you say is your top 5? What's your top 5 albums?
Now
of all time? It might be difficult. You might have to have a little think. But
you know what? I won't have a think because I know that I will walk out of here and think I should have mentioned that.
Yeah.
Same as if you asked me the top 5 MCs, but top 5 albums.
It's a bit different.
Okay.
That's why I asked that, you see.
It's a good one. I will go like this. I will go Pete Rock and CL Smooth, Mecca and the Soul Brother, 1.
Okay.
I will go By Any Means Necessary, Boogie Down Productions, 2.
Wow.
I will go, I've got to, obviously Illmatic goes in there. And this is not order of preference.
Classic.
Most Def, Black on Both Sides in at 4. And who takes number 5? I'm going to have to say it is De La Soul, Stakes As High is number 5.
Wow.
Now,
yeah,
if I was to pick who comes outside of that, I could pick another 5.
Yeah.
You know what I mean? But that's the 5 I'll go to right now. They're the 5.
Well, definitely Nas he's my number 1 Nas, even from any era. I felt that he was able to blend with the old era plus the new era as well. But Wu-Tang Forever album, even though we got the 36 Chambers, which is a classic, you know, but that Wu-Tang Forever album, the double disc.
Yeah.
I mean, that was just so powerful because I felt like it's the consciousness. Because with Wu-Tang, I got a few influences off them of they would always talk about the Asiatic black man.
Yeah.
You know, they were quite deep with stuff and like that, and because I've always been deep from young anyway. Yeah. You know, that's why we always talk about the importance of African history all the time and that, because I'm very influenced by the conscious MCs. You see, Nas talks a lot about Africa. Yeah. Or you got like, well, you had other, not too many of them, because obviously there's not too much African influences right there anyway when it comes to the beats, the drums, and a lot of African influence. Yeah. You know, because I didn't actually mention to you also, but I think I had a little talk with you the other day. You can always see the importance of African history, you know, from a positive perspective. Yeah. Like, I'm not going off the topic of the music, we're going to come back to that now. Of course, you know, you should be taught into the schools, and, you know, when you were growing up in your era, how did you see it as African history? Well, you know what, for me, growing up, I mean, from a school-wise, it was pretty much zero. I grew, you know, I was schooled, you know, from the 70s into the 80s. So as far as African history in schools, pretty much zero. That's where hip-hop came to the rescue, really, as far as I'm concerned, because from listening to like hip-hop from 88, 89, when you are listening to on the regular groups from Public Enemy to Poor Righteous Teachers to KRS-One, I mean, the Edutainment album for me, you know, it's one of the greatest albums as far as an intellectual, you know, educational album goes. So, you know, from Brand Nubian, you know, and there's so many at the time. X-Clan, do you know what I mean? X-Clan. So during the late 80s, early 90s, we were just so lucky that pretty much every other record that came out had a level of consciousness to it. Yeah, I love conscious artists. And you know, and that whole thing about learning about Malcolm X, learning about Marcus Garvey, learning about Harriet Tubman, learning about, you know, Egypt and the pyramids and all that kind of stuff, that was fed into us on a regular basis through the music that we loved. Well, Rakim, particularly, Rakim was one of the first to kick knowledge and kick science and kick mathematics. Oh, he was. Do you mean he was there? Because he was part of that. Yeah. And even though
from the outside, so some people who are listening to like the likes of Wu-Tang, for a lot of the fans, and I'll say white fans or whatever, for them looking at the Wu-Tang from outside, they probably wouldn't even pick up onto some of the knowledge and the science that they would drop and interweave into their music.
Just bopped it into the beat,
and they'd love the brand because it was such a strong brand, and you know they were the first people. People were never getting tattoos of artists before Wu-Tang. People weren't wearing, you know, certain clothing from a brand before Wu-Tang. They were the first people to do it. They were more than a movement. You know, they became a culture within a culture. They were the first to do that. They became a culture within a culture. For people that were fans of them, it was a way of life. But going back to the African influence, we were in the late 80s, early 90s to mid 90s. We were so lucky to have that, and a lot of people who were around today, who were in my age, who were looking at 50, squinting at 50 and hitting 50. We've got a lot to owe because the music that we listened to shaped us and educated us.
Yeah.
And we've passed that on to friends, family, kids.
Most definitely.
And it shaped us. It taught us things. How to try and look after yourself. How to treat each other. How to respect your own history and African history.
Yeah.
So for me, I was lucky hip-hop wise that was there.
It's like here, did you ever listen to Tragedy Gaddafi? Back in the day,
little bits. I wasn't a huge fan of the music, but
I remember he done Intelligent Hoodlum. It was about 19...
Tragedy Gaddafi. Sorry, I thought you meant Tragedy from Tupac. No, Tupac. You know Tupac.
Oh, the other Gaddafi. Yeah,
and Gaddafi. Sorry, I thought you meant Tragedy. Intelligent Hoodlum album. One of my favorite albums. I'll say this about 10 times tonight, but one of my favorite albums.
I have to bring up his name because, I mean, even some of the albums he's done, because he was able to last through to the 90s, but he was sort of going in and out of jail, weren't he?
Yeah.
But as an artist, he was just incredible.
Well, from that time, I mean,
Fug Matrix album. Yeah.
Paris.
Yeah.
Paris, Devil Made Me Do It album. Talk about unapologetic hip-hop that was strictly from a 5%er kind of, has an Afrocentric vibe. And the Bushkiller album as well, which is obviously controversial. So, if you go into those 90s archives of hip hop, you mentioned Tragedy Gaddafi there, and I mentioned Paris. There's so many more. Two Kings in the Cypher. There was ISIS. There was a whole off the X Clan came a whole bunch of artists as well.
Many underground artists.
But. And the thing I always like to say, though, is that although people, and it's good to look back fondly on that and think, what's happened to music now because the music now is this and this.
Yeah.
You got to remember, though, at the same time, you had Too Short, you had NWA, you had Two Live Crew, you had so many gangster rap music all throughout that. So it wasn't all conscious and it wasn't all...
That's true, yeah.
Raising black people. A lot of it was... what people might see now as not being so, so forward thinking or so, black or Afrocentric. But it's the same now.
They're kicking science back in the day more.
Yeah. But the music, but that music also sold a lot. So record companies who didn't have our best interests at heart would sign these artists and promote these artists because the music sold. Do you know what I mean? So we can't just think it was because there was this... Yes, there was a wave of black consciousness, but it made money. And once that shift happened, they started putting their money in other things.
I was going to say, when it was a big deal to go gold in the 80s and then platinum came out. Can you remember who the first platinum artist was? Was it LL Cool J or was it Biggie?
I don't know. I couldn't tell you without looking it up. Who the first platinum artist was. I mean, Rapper's Delight when... the Rapper's Delight when triple platinum, as the lyric says.
Okay.
Do you know what I mean? So, as it says in Stetsasonic, talking all that jazz, Rapper's Delight as a single went triple platinum. So it was way before.
But you never listened to AZ when he done the Do or Die album? 1995.
Do or Die album,
Do or Die, yeah. He's a clap.
Great album again.
Now amazing.
I was listening to a couple of tracks off that only, I'm going to say thank God for Spotify, but it does throw up some classics from time to time. And I was listening to to a great track. Who I won't say the name of the track because it's a little bit disrespectful to women, but there's a big tune on there.
Okay.
So AZ, you know, I say that
underrated.
There's no doubt that was a golden era of hip hop. You know, and I'm not one of those people that looks back with rose tinted glasses and says, "Oh, that's all good," and now what's happening is all bad. It's just that then people could create something new. So when you hear the Nas or the X-Clan or the even right up until Mos Def or, you know, Talib Kweli, up until that point, you could create something new.
Yeah.
Outkast, you know,
yeah.
a lot of Southern artists, it was new. Whereas now I think we're at a stage in hip-hop is that it's very difficult to create something that's purely unique.
And nearly down south, Scarface,
Ghetto Boys. I didn't mention Ghetto Boys.
Oh, Ghetto
before.
Boys.
I mean,
it's like kind of like where he was from New York, but he's not from New York.
No,
he's
they're from Houston.
Yeah, so, you know, he was respected so much back then.
Yeah, and back then, you know, only a handful of artists. You know, if you weren't from New York or LA at one point.
Yeah.
Then, you know, you maybe Philly. You know, okay, if you're from Philly or Chicago, you get a look in. But right now, I mean, when MCs and rappers and hip hop artists come out, you don't generally know exactly where they're from because
that's true.
It could be from anywhere. They could be from, you know, North Carolina, South Carolina. They could be from there, whatever. Do you know what I mean? But back then, you had to be from one place or the other at one point. But then it started popping up everywhere because everywhere had their own. Because in America, you could be huge in your own state and live comfortably off that.
Oh yeah.
If you've got that support and following, and that's soon. Because I was watching something about Outkast recently, and it was like they got booed at the Source Awards where there was the whole feud, the East Coast, West Coast. They won Best Album or something, or Best Newcomers or whatever they won. Got up on stage and got booed because they were from down south. And that was before, you know, and now look at Outkast, the scene as, you know, Andre 3000 is seen. He's in many people's top 5. I
mean, I do like, I'm more gravitate towards the New Yorkers, you know, especially Queensbridge.
Yeah.
Queensbridge. But I mean, some of the West Coast music I like than that, you know. Ice Cube, most definitely.
Yeah.
You know,
but me, when I think of West Coast, I don't automatically think of gangbang and lowride music. I think of Hieroglyphics, Souls and Mischief. I think of the Alcoholics. I think of Madlib. I think of you know, Farside.
Yeah, not all the gangbanging.
Do you know what I mean? Farside, LA, Hieroglyphics, Souls and Mischief, Casual, A+. These are all LA artists.
Yeah.
King T, all LA artists. So, you know, for me, it's funny because when you mention West Coast LA, you feel automatically think Snoop.
I was just gonna say, yeah.
NWA, Ice Cube. Although Ice Cube for me is probably in my top 5.
Most definitely Ice Cube.
Because them first 3 albums was just, you know, almost untouchable now.
Yeah, well, you can look at Ice Cube. Ice Cube, one of them where he could just come still to this day and drop a heavy track. He's just a natural.
I mean,
not comparing to back in the day.
After West Side Connection, my interest sort of dipped. I've got to say that was heavy.
That West Side Connection.
But I'm saying, but my interest, because then it became more, you know, more the music that I don't really gravitate towards, and you know,
kind of crossing over.
Yeah, I mean, there's some artists that still make. I mean, you know, artists in my top 5. I won't necessarily say every album they've made has been a classic. I haven't listened to the last maybe 4 or 5 KRS albums, but for me, KRS is one of my favorite artists of all time. So, but like with anything, sometimes their music doesn't, the music that they made back then might age well. The classics might age well, but them making music mightn't have the same effect. So, but don't get me wrong, I've got friends who, no matter what Chuck D or Public Enemy brings out, they will be on it.
Yeah.
But that's not, you know.
Did you ever listen to the rapper Cannabis?
Cannabis was
he was a deadly lyricist.
Yeah,
hundreds of bars he was kicking and that.
And he made it LL with Second Round Knockout.
I totally agree. And most people will try and say LL because he was the bigger artist. But let's be honest, lyrically, he took him out.
The Second Round Knockout, you don't come back.
But he had so much support, LL, where everyone would just say LL. But,
and you know, Cannabis again.
he's like a scientist himself.
MC, yeah.
He is intelligent, very,
Yeah.
And a lot of artists, because sometimes you can like the beats. Like I like the CNN first album, or the Edgar Capone.
Yeah.
Even though it's a bit of aggressive album and that, but it was just the raw lyrics. It was the rawness.
I mean,
Shaji Gaddafi actually influenced that album. He was a
He
was a part of that. Yeah, he put
Mobb Deep for me was again. I mean, a lot of people I
like Mobb Deep. Yeah,
but I do love Mobb Deep as far as like there's a few tracks, but I was never a huge. But again, it's music, isn't it? Everyone's got their own tastes. Do I listen to Mobb Deep albums front to back? No, I don't. But
I listen to the infamous and Hell on Earth, Made the Music.
But that's not saying that. I mean, that's just my.
Yeah.
You can't. The same time that you can't. You can't like everything.
You can't.
Certain things do it. Certain things for me. Certain things. I might listen to them as an individual track and say, well, that's what I like and that's what I don't like. So
when we get in now, I mean, we've gone through the 80s, we've gone through the 90s. Do you see? When we get into like the 2000 era, obviously I forgot to mention Jadakiss, Styles P, the Lox, So, who would you say, is there any new artist? I don't really listen to the new artists. Is there any new artist that you like?
There's loads. I mean, unfortunately, because even though Spotify is a wonderful thing, and because of the age I'm trying to keep myself active. So a lot of the music I listen to, sometimes I mightn't pick up on the names, but yeah. As far as brand new artists goes, I mean, let's just take a little step back. There's artists that bridge that gap. Like for me, love him or hate him, the Marmite of hip hop music is Kanye West. Kanye West sits comfortably in my top 5 MCs of all time, top 5 artists of all time. Because
I don't really rate him.
Yeah, because for me, again, it's taste and it's down to what you like, but. As far as a producer, I see him as being a genius. But lyrically as well, he bridged that gap. And he says it. He was the person who would put Freeway on a track with Talib Kweli. He says that, and he done it. He's the person that would make references to Third Base, make references to all these artists. The first guy with a Benz and a backpack. He was the guy who bridged the sort of backpack, underground, jazzy hip-hop kind of vibe to the new kind of flashy drill type of trap, kind of stuff. So, and obviously we've gone through the whole thing without even mentioning Jay-Z. Jay-Z again, he's an artist that has been around since the mid-90s up to right now. And
I listen to Jay. I like Jay-Z's first album, The Reasonable Doubt.
Yeah. Whereas for me, it took me. I used to listen to Jay-Z albums. Because I'm a DJ, I used to listen to Jay-Z albums to see what I could play in the club, and it wasn't really up until one of the Blueprints albums and then the Black album that I actually sat and listened fully to a Jay-Z album as an album.
I like this
before that, I would find track. I'd skip through the album. That's a joint. I can play that in the club. And the same for a lot of artists at the time. DMX. Can I play this? Can I play that? Can I play this?
Yeah.
But as far as now, if you're talking about 2021, there's loads. There's an artist called John Wayne who people need to check out. I've only just come across an artist who goes by the name of Ransom, who is absolutely insane. There is artists like, Tanya Morgan came out a few years ago, but they're great. Little Brother, I just got back to do an album. So Fonte and Big Pooh got together and make an album recently. There's just so many artists out there now that keep on coming up. But now you got to go and find it. It's like back in the day, you have to go and find it.
So if you just go back into the 90s, for example, when we were coming from the 80s, them names you mentioned about Big Daddy Kane, Rock, when we were going into all them names, see when Biggie came out, with Ready to Die, and it seems that lyrics has always been there with artists, but it seemed the sales just went sky high. I know you had the West Coast, because the West Coast were kind of taken over a bit at that time. It's like some people thought New York were going soft.
Yeah.
Which, I didn't think that myself. But when Biggie came out, it was like he brought, and Nas as well, Nas before Biggie, but it was Biggie with the sales.
Yeah, there's no doubt about it that the whole bad boy movement sort of tipped the scales with regards to who was seen as being champions of the hip hop scene.
Yeah.
And when Biggie came out and the whole feud between East Coast and West Coast, that fueled fire. And obviously the Wu-Tang thing that came around the same time as well, just really, and Nas just stamped back, just New York basically reclaimed it.
Reclaimed it, yeah.
As far as sales goes, you got to remember that this was a time that the popularity and the success of hip hop music was just moving up and up and up. The mid 90s, late 90s was the first time. I mean, no one could have envisaged that any music genre would outsell country in America. That was the slam dunk, 100%. No one is selling no more than us. You can take your rock and roll, you can take your rock, you can take this and that, you can take your punk, whatever you call it. No music was going to outsell country until hip hop, and hip hop was the first to outsell country and western and country music in the States.
Shows you how powerful it is.
Because it was the voice of the youth.
The voice of the youth,
and it transcended colour, really. Even though and then obviously you got to remember. Again, we haven't mentioned Eminem and all this.
I don't rate him. I don't rate him.
You know what? Whether you rate him, he's never in my top 5.
Yeah.
But
I don't even think he's me top 100.
No, but as a lyricist, and as as his influence, and that Marshall Mathers album and the singles that came off of that, and the likes of Stan and stuff like that. Again, like I mentioned before, when someone comes with something new and different, he was them things and more. And lyrically, there was no doubt when he had talent-wise, he was increasing, and still is. I came across the track. I'm not a big Eminem fan, but I came across the track only about a few weeks ago, and I couldn't believe it was insane. His lyrical delivery, still 40 odd years old, is insane. And the reason why I mentioned him is because how he increased the popularity of hip hop music.
Oh, of course.
You know what I mean? Because then, not only were white kids watching hip hop music, thinking I love that and this represents me. Eminem, for them, that they could be him.
I was like their god or something.
They could be him. They were like, okay, now we can do it.
Yeah.
Now we know. So, and he is in a lot of people's top 5, and so was Andre 3000. Again, not in mine, but that's what people's choice is. So,
obviously, of course, it's
the sale of it and the popularity of it became
just
insane during the late 90s, mid 2000s, and obviously the landscape's changed now with regard to how people listen to and watch music, but it's still the number one.
Well, as we're coming to the end of the show anyway, it's been great. I love talking about hip hop from way back, the origins of hip hop, and it's been great having you on, DJ Toucan.
Cool, man. Hopefully we can get back. We can do a part 2, part 3, part 4.
That's it, So this is Discovering with James Diboe, season 2. And we look forward to watching this show back. We're discovering new things all the time, and that's how we do it, So I want to thank you very much, DJ Toucan.
Thank you.
God bless.